This is Module 4, Lesson 2. We're still working on solving linear equations with one variable. Okay, so now we're going to solve two-step linear equations. This is going to be actually in the packet. Let's start here. If I'm doing a two-step linear equation and I'm trying to solve for the variable, okay, first you find your variable, and then you're going to do whatever you need to do to solve for the variable. You're going to want the variable on one side of the equation. You're going to want the numbers on the other side of the equation. Okay? So let's look at this one right here. 9a minus 2 equals negative 65. If I've got that, I'm trying to solve for the a. When you're crossing the equal sign and you're solving for a variable, work PEMDAS in the opposite direction. In other words, we're going to take care of any addition or subtraction first. This should be a review from years past. See how this is 9 times a minus 2 equals negative 65? Well, I would add 2 to both sides, which gives me 9 times a is equal to negative 65 plus 2. That's negative 63. Now, 9 times a, the opposite of multiplying by a is to divide by 9 is to divide by 9. Opposite of multiplying by 9 is divide by 9. So what I've got is a is equal to negative 7. Now, I'm going to show you this one time how to check your answers. The rest of them, if you want to check them, I'll let you check them, but I'm just going to work the problems. If I were checking this now, I would substitute this in. Your solution is negative 7, so let's see if it works. 9 times negative 7 minus 2 equals negative 65. 9 times negative 7 would be negative 63. Minus 2. Is that equal to negative 65? Yes, it is. Negative 65 is equal to negative 65. So the solution is negative 7. The solution for the equation is negative 7. Now let's look at number 2. If I'm solving for x, the variable, I would subtract 7 from each side. What I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. So this gives me negative 4x is equal to 24. And if I divide both sides by negative 4, x would be negative 6. Remember, if your signs are different when you divide, then you have a negative number. Okay? Let's look at number 3. Now, if you wanted to check it, you could. You could plug in the solution, which is negative 6, to the original equation and see if it works. On number 3, I've got k divided by 3 minus 11 equals negative 5. Let's solve for k, which is our variable. We'd add 11 to both sides. That gives me k divided by 3 is equal to 6. Okay, now when I divide by something, the opposite of dividing is to multiply. This 3 over 1 would give me 3 over 3k, which is 1k, or just k. 6 times 3 is 18. So k is equal to 18. Let's look at this one. If I'm solving for the w, I need to get the 23 away from it. The 23 is positive. So let's subtract the 23. This would give me negative 15 is equal to negative 5w. Now, negative 5w means negative 5 is multiplied by w. The opposite of multiplying by 5 is to divide by negative 5. Sorry, the opposite of multiplying by negative 5 is to divide by negative 5. This gives me 1, so w is equal to negative 15 divided by negative 5, which is positive 3. Let's look at number 5. We're solving for m, our variable. I put this line down through the equal sign. We're going to get rid of the addition or subtraction first. If I add 11 to this side, I do the same here. This would give me 8 times m is equal to 0. Divide both sides by 8, and m is 0. Your solution is 0. Okay, on this one, negative 6 is equal to 1 plus n divided by negative 4. Okay, negative 6 is equal to Now, what do we need to do? We need to subtract 1 from both sides, don't we? So let's go back and we're going to actually do that. Let's do that before we keep writing it. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down my equal sign, my line down my equal sign. I'm going to subtract 1 from each side so I can get my variable by itself. -6 plus -1 is -7. This is gone because it equals 0. -7 is equal to n divided by -4. What the opposite of dividing by -4 is to multiply by -4. When I multiply by -4, let's look to see what happens on this side first. This is the same as -4/1. This cancels, and I have n is equal to -4 times -7. That will give me a positive 28. Okay? Number 7. Right? I'm solving for the x. Now, I need to get rid of the 19. So what if I subtract 19 from each side? That leaves me with -x is equal to 11. Now, when I talk about a negative x, that's actually a -1x, right? So I'm multiplying -1. The opposite of multiplying by -1 is to divide by -1. X is equal to -11. And number 8. -17 plus r divided by 2 equals -25. Draw your line down here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the 17 by adding it to both sides. Okay? This leaves me with r divided by 2 will give me -8. R divided by 2, the opposite of dividing by 2 is to multiply by 2. If I multiply -8 times 2, I get r is equal to -16. See, your 2's canceled here. R is -16. Okay? Now the back of this page. Skip 9, 10, and 11 because they have decimals, and I don't want you working with decimals. Here I want to talk about how to deal with when you're multiplying a variable by a fraction. Okay, if I were solving this problem, the first thing I would do is I would add 7 to both sides. What I do to one side of the equal sign, I do to both. And I now have 2/3 x is equal to 12. Now I want that to be 1x. I need to get rid of that. If I'm multiplying by 2/3, the opposite of that is to divide, but that gets really funny when you're dividing by a fraction. What if I do this? What if I multiply that 2/3 by a reciprocal, 3/2? See how I flip the fraction over? If I do that, I get 6 divided by 6, which is 1. That's what I want, is a 1 in front of this x. So let's multiply. When we have a fraction, let's multiply by that fraction's reciprocal. When I do so, these cancel, and I just have x is equal to, now remember, we got to multiply what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So we've got to multiply this by the reciprocal. 12 is the same as 12/1. So that gives me 36 divided by 2, which is 18. So x is equal to 18. Let's look at number 13. Let's do the same thing here. We're solving for c, our variable. If we subtract 9 from each side, we've now got -10 is equal to -5/8 times c. Okay? I'm multiplying by a fraction, so to get rid of that fraction, I need to multiply by its reciprocal, -8/5. That would cancel my fraction here, but I need to multiply this -10 by -8/5. Okay? Let's do that over here. -8/5 times 10, which is 10/1, would give me -80. I'm sorry, there's a negative there, so that's a positive 80 over 5, okay? And 80 divided by 5 would give you 16, okay? So here, our C is equal to 16. Now let's try this one. What if I'm trying to get m by itself? What if I add 16 to both sides? 1/3 times m then is equal to 15. If I'm multiplying by a fraction, the way I get rid of it is I multiply by its reciprocal, which is 3/1. And that's just 15/1 if it's a whole number. Notice this is gone. So m would be equal to 45. Okay? Now let's deal with these two-step equations here. In this case, I'm dividing everything here by 6. Okay? X minus 1. All of that is divided by 6. That's equal to 2. Well, if I'm dividing all of this by 6, let's multiply all of this by 6. If I do that, I'm going to wind up with 6/6 times x minus 1. 6/6 is 1. So I'm getting rid of this. What I do to one side, I do to the other. I've multiplied that by 6, so I multiply this by 6. I now have x minus 1 is 12. Let's add 1 to each side, and x is 13. Same thing here. If I'm dividing this m plus 17, this whole thing, by -2, and it's equal to 9, the opposite of dividing by -2 is to multiply by -2. That would give me -2/2, so this cancels. What I do to one side, I do to the other, so I needed to multiply that by -2. That gives me -18 is equal to m plus 17. Let's subtract 17 from both sides, and m is -35. Okay? And 17, I'm dividing this by 16, so I need to multiply each side by 16, right? Multiply by 16 to get rid of these two. What I do to one side, I do to the other. K minus 5 then is equal to 16 times 3, 16 times -3, it's -48. Let's add 5 to both sides. And K is now equal to -43. Okay, our solution is -43. And then on this one, P plus 20 divided by 7 equals -4. To get rid of the 7, I multiply both sides by that 7. It gives me P plus 20 equals -28. Let's subtract 20 from both sides. And I've got P is equal to -48. Okay? That's your solution for that one.